Joseph Knight's Recollection of Early Mormon History. Edited by Dean Jesse, BYU Studies, Volume 17, Number 1. On August 22, 1842, while reflecting upon the faithful few who had stood by him in every hour of peril, Joseph Smith recorded the following sentiments about Joseph Knight. He was among the number of the first to administer to my necessities, while I was laboring in the commencement of the bringing forth of the work of the Lord, and of laying the foundation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For 15 years he has been faithful and true, and even-handed and exemplary, and virtuous and kind, never deviating to the right hand or to the left. Behold, he is a righteous man. May God Almighty lengthen out the old man's days, and may his trembling, tortured, and broken body be renewed, and in the vigor of health turn upon him if it be thy will, consistently, O God. And it shall be said of him, by the sons of Zion, while there is one of them remaining, that this was a faithful man in Israel. Therefore his name shall never be forgotten. Joseph Knight, Sr., was born November 3, 1772 at Oakham, Worcester, Massachusetts. In 1809 he moved to Bainbridge, Chenango County, New York, and 2 years later to Colesville, Broome County, New York, where he remained for 19 years. He owned a farm, a gristmill and carding machine, and according to his son, Newell, was not rich, yet possessed enough of this world's goods to secure to himself and family the necessaries and comforts of life. His family consisted of 3 sons and 4 daughters. While Joseph Smith was living in Harmony, Pennsylvania, he was occasionally employed by Joseph Knight. Such was the friendship that developed between these 2 men that the younger Joseph confided in his employer the circumstances of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and the elder sent provisions from time to time for the sustenance of his friend during the translation work. When Joseph Smith obtained the Book of Mormon plates in September 1827, Knight was visiting in the Smith home in Manchester. According to Lucy Smith, her son used Knight's horse and carriage as his means of conveyance on that occasion. Although not numbered among those present at the organization of the church in April 1830, Joseph Knight was baptized in June of that year. His family formed the nucleus of a small branch of the church in Colesville, New York. In 1831 he moved with the Colesville Saints to Kirtland, Ohio, and a few months later continued with them to Independence, Missouri, where he helped pioneer the Latter-day Saint settlement of that state. Joseph Knight died on February 3, 1847 at Pisgah, Iowa during the Mormon exodus from Illinois. Joseph Knight's account reproduced below, although undated and unsigned, appears to be a holograph penned sometime between the author's departure from Jackson County, Missouri in 1833 and his death in 1847. Located in the church archives, the document is written in ink on both sides of 5 8 by 10-inch pages. The manuscript is incomplete, missing at least one beginning page. Although written in pencil from 1 to 10, the page numbers were obviously added by a later writer to designate the sequence of surviving pages. A clerk's filing inscription on the document reads, September 22, 1827. Manuscript of the Early History of Joseph Smith, Finding of Plates, N.C., N.C. The words September 22, 1827, Early, and Finding of Plates, N.C., N.C. were inserted by Thomas Bullock, a church clerk from 1843 to 1857. Minimal punctuation has been added here to facilitate reading. Manuscript of the Early History of Joseph Smith. From thence he went to the hill where he was informed the record was, and found no trouble, for it appeared plain as though he was acquainted with the place. It was so plain in the vision that he had of the place. He went and found the place and opened it and found a plain box. He uncovered it and found the book and took it out and laid it down by his side and thought he would cover the place over again, thinking there might be something else here. But he was told to take the book and go right away. And after he had covered the place he turned round to take the book and it was not there, and he was astonished that the book was gone. He thought he would look in the place again and see if it had not got back again. He had heard people tell of such things. And he opened the box and behold, the book was there. He took hold of it to take it out again, and behold, he could not stir the book any more than he could the mountain. He exclaimed, Why can't I stir this book? And he was answered, You can't have it now. Joseph says, When can I have it? The answer was the 22nd day of September next, if you bring the right person with you. Joseph says, "Who is the right person?" The answer was your oldest brother. But before September came, his oldest brother died. Then he was disappointed and did not know what to do. But when the 22nd day of September came, he went to the place, and the personage appeared and told him he could not have it now. But the 22nd day of September next he might have the book if he brought with him the right person. Joseph says, "Who is the right person?" The answer was, "You will know." Then he looked in his glass and found it was Emma Hale, daughter of old Mr. Hale of Pennsylvania, a girl that he had seen before, for he had been down there before with me. Joseph then went to Mr. Stowell's stole, where he had lived some time before. But Mr. Stowell could not pay him money for his work very well, and he came to me perhaps in November and worked for me until about the time that he was married, which I think was in February. And I paid him the money, and I furnished him with a horse and cutter to go and see his girl down to Mr. Hale's. And soon after this he was married, and Mr. Stowell moved him and his wife to his father's in Palmyra, Ontario County. Nothing material took place until toward fall, the forepart of September. I went to Rochester on business and returned by Palmyra to be there about the 22nd of September. I was there several days. I will say there was a man near by the name Samuel Lawrence. He was a seer, and he had been to the hill and knew about the things in the hill, and he was trying to obtain them. He, Joseph Smith, had talked with me and told me the conversation he had with the personage, which told him if he would do right according to the will of God he might obtain the plate, the 22nd day of September next, and if not he never would have them. Now Joseph was some afraid of him, Samuel Lawrence, that he might be a trouble to him. He therefore sent his father up to Sam's tent, as he called him, near night, to see if there was any signs of his going away that night. He told his father to stay till near dark, and if he saw any signs of his going, if I find him there I will thrash the stumps with him. So the old man came away and saw no thing like it. This is to show the troubles he had from time to time to obtain the plates. So that night we all went to bed, and in the morning I got up and my horse and carriage was gone. But after a while he came home and he turned out the horse. All come into the house to breakfast. But no thing said about where they had been. After breakfast Joseph called me into the other room, and he set his foot on the bed and leaned his head on his hand and says, "Well, I am disappointed." "Well," say I am sorry." "Well," says he, "I am greatly disappointed, it is 10 times better than I expected." Then he went on to tell the length and width and thickness I expected. Then he went on to tell the length and width and thickness of the plates, and said they appear to be gold. But he seemed to think more of the glasses or the Urim and Thummim than he did of the plates, for, says he, "I can see anything, they are marvelous. Now they are written in characters, and I want them translated." Now he was commanded not to let any one see those things, but a few for witness at a given time. Now it soon got about that Joseph Smith had found the plates, and people come in to see them, but he told them that they could not, for he must not show them. But many insisted and offered money and property to see them. But, for keeping them from the people, they persecuted and abused them. And they, the Smiths, were obliged to hide them, the plates, and they hid them under a brick hearth in the west room. About this time came this Samuel Lawrence and one Beeman, a great rodsman 13, and wanted to talk with him. And he went into the west room, and they proposed to go shares with him and tried every way to bargain with him, but could not. Then Beeman took out his rods and held them up, and they pointed down to the hearth where they were hid. "There," says Beeman, "it is under that hearth." So they had to guard the house until sometime in November. He obtained $50 in money and hired a man to move him and his wife to Pennsylvania to her father's, his wife being unwell and wanted to go to her father's. He bought a piece of land of her father with a house and barn on it. Here the people began to tease him to see the book and to offer him money and property, and they crowded so hard that he had to hide it in the mountain. He now began to be anxious to get them translated. He therefore with his wife drew of the characters exactly like the ancient, and sent Martin Harris to see if he could get them translated. He went to Albany and to Philadelphia and to New York, and he found men that could translate some of the characters in all those places. Mitchell, Samuel L. Mitchell and Anthony, Charles Anthon, of New York were the most learned, but there were some characters they could not well understand. Therefore Anthony told him that he thought if he had the original he could translate it. And he wrote a very good piece to Joseph and said if he would send the original he would translate it. But at last Martin Harris told him that he could not have the original for it was commanded not to be shown. And he was mad and said, "What does this mean?" And he tore the paper that he wrote all to pieces and stamped it under his feet and says, "Bring me the original or I will not translate it." Mr. Harris, seeing he was in a passion, he said, "Well, I will go home and see, and if they can be had I will write to you immediately." So he came home and told how it was, and they went to him no more. Then was fulfilled the 29th chapter of Isaiah. Now he, Joseph Smith, being an unlearned man, did not know what to do. Then the Lord gave him power to translate himself. Then were the learned men confounded, for he, by the means he found with the plates, he could translate those characters better than the learned. Now the way he translated was he put the Urim and Thummim into his hat and darkened his eyes, then he would take a sentence and it would appear in bright Roman letters. Then he would tell the writer and he would write it. Then that would go away, the next sentence would come and so on. But if it was not spelt right it would not go away till it was right, so we see it was marvelous. Thus was the whole translated. Now when he began to translate he was poor and was put to it for provisions and had no one to write a little for him through the winter. The next spring Oliver Cowdery, a young man from Palmyra, came to see old Mr. Smith, Joseph's father, about this work, and he sent him down to Pennsylvania to see Joseph and satisfy himself. So he came down and was soon convinced of the truth of the work. The next spring came Martin Harris down to Pennsylvania to write for him, and he wrote 116 pages of the first part of the Book of Mormon. And about this time Martin wanted to go home about some business and he wanted to take the writings with him, but Joseph put him off. But he urged him by fair promises that he would be careful and he would return it again. But he being free with it, some person tive hold of it and kept it so that he never could obtain it again. Therefore Joseph lost his privilege for a while. But after repenting he again received the privilege of translating again. As in Book of Covenants page 163, he could not translate but little, being poor and nobody to write for him but his wife, and she could not do much and take care of her house, and he being poor and no means to live but work. His wife's father and family were all against him and would not help him. He and his wife came up to see me the first of the winter 1828 and told me his case. But I was not in easy circumstances and I did not know what it might amount to, and my wife and family all against me about helping him. But I let him have some little provisions and some few things out of the store, a pair of shoes and $3 in money to help him a little. In January his father and Samuel Smith came from Manchester to my house when I was busy drawing lumber. I told him they had traveled far enough. I would go with my sleigh and take them down tomorrow. I went down and found them well, and the boy were glad to see us. We conversed about many things. In the morning I gave the old man $50 and Joseph a little money to buoy paper to translate, I having but little with me. The old gentleman told me to come and see him once in a while as I could. I went home, followed teaming till the last of March, the sleighing being good. I told my wife I must go down and see Joseph again. "Why do you go soon for?" said she. Says I, "Come go and see." And she went with me. Next morning we went down and found them well and were glad to see us. Joseph talked with us about his translating and some revelation he had received, and from that time my wife began to believe and continued a full believer until she died, and that was the 7th day of August 1831. In the spring of 1829 Oliver Cowdery, a young man from Palmyra, went to see old Mr. Smith about the book that Joseph had found. And he told him about it and advised him to go down to Pennsylvania and see for himself and to write for Joseph. He went down and received a revelation concerning the work, and he was convinced of the truth of the work, and he agreed to write for him till it was done. How Joseph and Oliver came up to see me if I could help him to some provisions, they having no way to buy any. But I was to Catskill. But when I came home my folks told me what Joseph wanted. But I had engaged to go to Catskill again the next day, and I went again, and I bought a barrel of mackerel and some lined paper for writing. And when I came home I bought some 9 or 10 bushels of grain and 5 or 6 bushels taters, potatoes, and a pound of tea, and I went down to see him, and they were in want. Joseph and Oliver were gone to see if they could find a place to work for provisions, but found none. They returned home and found me there with provisions, and they were glad, for they were out. Their family consisted of 4, Joseph and wife, Oliver, and his, Joseph's, brother Samuel. Then they went to work and had provisions enough to last till the translation was done. Then he agreed with Martin Harris to print. They therefore agreed with E. Grandin to print 5,000 copies, which was printed and bound at Palmyra in the spring of 1830. Now in the spring of 1830 I went with my team and took Joseph out to Manchester to his father. When we was on our way he told me that there must be a church formed, but did not tell when. Now when we got here to his father's we saw a man some 80 rods before us run across the street with a bundle in his hand. There, says Joseph, there is Martin going across the road with something in his hand. Says I, how could you know he me so far? Says he, I believe it is him, and when we came up it was Martin with a bunch of Mormon books. He came to us, and after compliments he says, the books will not sell, for nobody wants them. Joseph says, I think they will sell well. Says he, I want a commandment. Why, says Joseph, fulfill what you have got. But, says he, I must have a commandment. Joseph put him off. But he insisted 3 or 4 times he must have a commandment. We went home to his father's, and Martin with us. Martin stayed at his father's and slept in a bed on the floor with me. Martin awoke me in the night and asked me if I felt anything on the bed. I told him no. Says I, did you? Yes, I felt something as big as a grat dog sprang upon my breast. Says I, was you not mistaken? No, says he. It was so. I sprang up and felt, but I could see nor feel nothing. In the morning he got up and said he must have a commandment to Joseph, and went home. And along in the after part of the day Joseph and Oliver received a commandment which is in Book of Covenants, page 174.20. I stayed a few days waiting for some books to be bound. Joseph said there must be a church built up. I had been there several days. Old Mr. Smith and Martin Harris come for Rod, forward, to be baptized, for the first. They found a place in a lot a small stream ran through, and they were baptized in the evening because of persecution. They went forward and was baptized, being the first I saw baptized in the new and everlasting covenant. I had some thoughts to go for Rod, but I had not the Book of Mormon, and I wanted to examine a little more, I being a restorationer and had not examined so much as I wanted to. But I should have felt better if I had gone forward. But I went home and was baptized in June with my wife and family. There was one thing I will mention: that evening that old brother Smith and Martin Harris was baptized. Joseph was filled with spirit to a great degree to see his father and Mr. Harris that he had been with so much he burst out with grief and joy, and seemed as though the world could not hold him. He went out into the lot and appeared to want to get out of sight of everybody, and would sob and cry, and seemed to be so full that he could not live. Oliver and I went after him and came to him, and after a while he came in. But he was the most wrought upon that I ever saw any man. But his joy seemed to be full. I think he saw the great work he had begun and was desirous to carry it out. On the 6th day of April 1830 he begun the church with 6 members, and received the following Revelation Book of Covenants, page 177. They all kneeled down and prayed, and Joseph gave them instructions how to build up the church, and exhorted them to be faithful in all things, for this is the work of God. Now after he had set things in order and got a number of Mormon books, we returned home. Then in June, as I before said, I and my family and a number more were baptized, Joseph being present and confirmed them. And through that season there were many baptized in many places, and the church grew and multiplied. But soon after the church began to grow, the people began to be angry and to persecute, and called them fools, and said they were deceived. But along towards fall, Joseph and Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer, and John Whitmore came from Harmony in Pennsylvania to my house on some business. And some of the vagabonds found they were there, and they made a cat's paw of a young fellow by the name of Dr. Benton in Shenango County to swear out a warrant against Joseph for, as they said, pretending to see underground. A little clause they found in the York laws against such things. The officer came to my house near night, and took him. I harnessed my horses, and we all went up to the village, but it was so late they could not try him that night, and it was put off till morning. I asked Joseph if he wanted counsel. He said he thought he should. I went that night and saw Mr. James Davidson, a man I was acquainted with. The next morning they gathered a multitude of people that were against him. Mr. Davidson said it looked like a squally day. He thought we had better have John Reed, a pretty good speaker, nearby. I told him we would, so I employed them both. So after a trial all day, just at night he was dismissed. Then there was another officer was ready, and took him on the same case down to Broome County below forthwith. I hired both these lawyers and took them down home with me that night. The next day it continued all day till midnight. But they could find no thing against him, therefore he was dismissed. Soon after this Joseph left the Susquehanna River and went to Manchester to his father's. Then about the first thing Sidney Rigdon came from Ohio to see Joseph, and they both came down to Broome County, and Joseph and Sidney went down to Harmony to settle some business. And the mob found they were gone, and they found when they were expected back, and we found they had a plan laid to take Joseph and Sidney and me. Now Sidney had been at my house several days, and had preached there several times, and he was too smart for them, therefore they wanted to trouble him. And the day we expected them I sent my son down to meet them and told them of their plan, and they turned across to Chenango Point. And so went to the lakes. And I loaded up what I could carry, and went away that night for the lakes. I also took my wife and daughter, for we were, calculating to go soon, for we a little before had a revelation to go to Ohio. So the mob watched all night at the bridge. But behold, we all came up missing, and the poor mob lost all their trouble. Now Joseph and I went right on to Kirtland, Ohio, but did not stay long there, for in March we went to the town of Thompson, about 20 miles, and in the spring the Colesville church all came on. But Joseph remained in Kirtland, and Sidney soon came to Kirtland. Now this spring Joseph received a number of revelation. One was to purchase 1,000 acres of land which was claimed by Leman Copley 24 and not paid for. He had a little before come into the church and appeared to be zealous and faithful. We all went to work and made fence and planted and sowed the fields. About this time we were called upon to consecrate our properties. But Brother Copley would not consecrate his property, therefore he was cut off from the church. Then we was commanded to take up our journey to the regions westward to the borders of the Lamanite. And we sold out what we could, but Copley took the advantage of us, and we could not get anything for what we had done. So we left Copley's in June and moved our things to Wellsville on the Ohio River, which was about 90 miles. Then we went on board the steamer the 3rd day of July, and we landed in Upper Missouri the 26th of the same month. We found ourselves among strangers, but the people seemed to be friendly with us. And we found the country to be beautiful, rich and pleasant, and we made ourselves as comfortable as we could. And in a few days Joseph and Sidney and a number of Brotherin came, and they looked out and entered a considerable of land for the people to settle on. We found it a new country with some settlers on it. There was one Joshua Lewis that had come into the church the winter before, he and his wife. And they were faithful and good to us and took us into their house, my wife being sick as before stated. She died the 7th day of August, and Joseph and Sidney attended her funeral on the 8th. She was buried in the woods, a spot chosen out by ourselves. I was along by where she was buried a few days after, and I found the hogs had began to root where she was buried. I being very unwell, but I took my axe the next day and went and built a pen round it. It was the last I done for her. Joseph at this time looked out the country and found the place for the city and temple and set mark, and after giving all other necessary instructions he returned back for Kirtland. But as time came along we often heard from him and received revelation. The next year in 1832 he came again to Missouri 28 and set things in order and called the Colesville church together and sealed them up to eternal life. And this made some little feeling among others, but I think he knew best. So that passed of and he returned to Kirtland again, and I think he did not come to Missouri the next year, for the mob began to show their black heads in 1833. But Joseph sent and counseled during our troubles in Jackson County, and after the worst came to the worst thought we had better leave the county.